On today's show, a fun Locked On crossover episode is Tyler Wojciak of Locked On Irish and, of course, a big Cleveland Cavaliers fan. Going to join the show, talk about LeBron and the Cavs' memories from back in the day, the current Cleveland Cavaliers this offseason, and, of course, we will talk, could NFL players play in the NBA or could NBA players play in the NFL? That's all straight ahead on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham, and you might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure to drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do us a favor as we get started here. Click that thumbs up button for us. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. On today's show, Tyler Wojciak of Locked On Irish going to join the show. I know a lot of you are Ohio State fans, so you might be familiar with him from listening to his show leading up to the national championship game last year. But what you might not know is he is a Northeast Ohioan. He's born and raised here, lives out in LA now, but is a big Cleveland Cavaliers fan. So we talk a lot about our first memories as fans of the team from way back when in the first LeBron era. Of course, where the team is at right now, what happened this past postseason, the offseason that was. And then, of course, we do get to, could NBA players play in the NFL, and who from this current Cavs roster would make sense as an NFL player? So we talk about all that, a really fun conversation. Really excited that Tyler was able to join me. Very much appreciate taking the time to jump on Locked On Cavs. So without anything else from me, here's my conversation with Tyler Wojciak. And now we bring in the guy who is actually my first listen every day, Tyler Wojciak from the Locked On Irish podcast. If you listen to the show, especially during November and December last year, you probably noticed from my attire that I am in football season, a pretty big Notre Dame fan. Tyler, of course, hosts Locked On Irish, which is part of my daily routine as a Notre Dame fan. Of course, a lot of you are probably Ohio State fans, which means you might have listened to him prior to the national championship game last year. But what you might not know about Tyler is he's actually a Northeast Ohioan as well. He doesn't live here anymore, but he once did. And that means he's a fan of the Northeast Ohio teams, including, of course, your Cleveland Cavaliers. So Tyler, really happy to have you. And just kind of wanted to start, like, where did your Cavs fandom come from? Like, what do you just remember about growing up a Cavs fan?
First of all, thrilled to be here. It's always fun being on a podcast that I normally watch or listen to. So this is quite an honor. But my first memories of watching the Cavs it's all LeBron, because he got drafted and I was 7 years old at the time. And that was sort of like when I was starting to get really into sports. I think my parents could tell pretty early on that I was a little bit weird in the sense that I was reading the sports page on the Plain Dealer pretty much every morning before I could even fully understand what the text actually said on the page. But it just worked out so perfectly with like the first tenure with LeBron on the Cavs, because as he's sort of becoming the best player in the NBA, I'm becoming obsessed with all sports. And I just remember vividly watching that game against the Pistons when he scored like 29 points in a row in the playoffs. And I'm watching with my dad. By that point, my family had moved from Cleveland to Louisville, Kentucky, but we still watched all of the Cleveland teams religiously. Maybe not so much the Browns, but definitely the Cavs and the Indians at the time. But those are some of like the greatest moments from when I was growing up watching sports as a kid, being able to watch LeBron. And I was devastated when he left. And I probably had some choice words for him at the time. I have since forgiven him. I'm sure that he's happy to know that now. But it really all aligns with LeBron and those teams like Larry Hughes and then Mo Williams and Big Z. Like, just a great time to be growing up as a kid and watching the Cavs, because I didn't really have to deal with all the years sort of pre-LeBron when things were not that great for the Cavs.
Right. I'm glad you brought up that game against Detroit, because for me, you know, as a guy in my 30s now that grew up a giant Cavs fan, like that was one of my core sports memories. I was 10 at the time, I think. or not 10 at the time. I was 10 when LeBron was drafted. So I was, entering just before high school at the time when that game happened. And like, I remember watching it on this small TV that I had in my room at my parents' house, which basically is the size of my computer screen right now. And
I think we had one of those too.
Right. Like that portable TV that you could, like, you have to stand right up against the screen basically to see anything that's going on. And I remember everything about that game. And I actually later this summer going to be, or I guess in the next couple of weeks at this point, going to be doing some Cavs classic rewatches. And that is like the first game on my list that I need to go back through and watch that and talk about that game again. Hopefully going to have somebody that actually played in that game. It's not going to be LeBron, but somebody that played in that game on that podcast. And I think that'll be a lot of fun, but I'm with you there. That was one of my first, maybe not my first Cavs memory, because I remember a lot of the LeBron stuff before then. And I am a couple of years older than you, but that certainly was from that first run, like the best Cavs LeBron memory that I have. And just going on from there, obviously we get the second LeBron tenure. He then goes away again, and the Cavs they've gone through a rebuild and they've come out on the other side. 64 wins last season. What's it like for you? Because you do live in Los Angeles now. And I think that you probably have a little bit of a luxury of a lot of these games starting at 4:00 in the afternoon, as opposed to 7:00 local time here. But what's it like for you now as a Cavs fan on the West Coast?
Well, I could say that this past season was awesome. And I think that it's great knowing that the Cavs are a really solid organization, top to bottom. I mean, obviously things didn't end, but I always just felt like even after LeBron left that they were going to be back sooner rather than later. I didn't expect the Donovan Mitchell trade to happen, but then once they made that trade, it was pretty clear, hey, they're trying to win again. And I almost felt like a new level of excitement, because for my entire life, all of the Cavs' success was basically because of LeBron. So it felt like I personally was entering this new chapter in my Cavs fandom. And then this year, like, it really reached a fever pitch. My favorite game of the season was when they came back to beat the Celtics in late February, when they were down by I think it was 25 in the first quarter. Jason Tatum was telling the Cavs to basically get the F out of there. And I mean, I guess I couldn't really blame them, but then they came back. And that was probably the most excited I've been about a regular season game, and I can't even remember, right? Because, when we're watching the Cavs and really all these teams, like, there is an understanding that like the postseason is going to be so much different, and it's such like this is great that you're having all this success. What's it going to look like in the postseason? But because it was going up against the Celtics, the team that we thought they were going to have to face at one point in the Eastern Conference Finals, it felt like a postseason game. So being able to be really attached to the Cavs again when they're in this new era has been great. And I also I wouldn't consider myself a Lakers fan, but I keep up with what they're doing because a lot of my friends out here are big Lakers fans. So I do take some enjoyment in the fact that LeBron left the Cavs to go to the Lakers. Things have not really worked. I mean, they did win a championship, so they deserve all the credit for that. But now it felt like, okay, the Cavs are actually in a better place without LeBron. And even though I still like LeBron, that was a pretty nice feeling.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of Cavs fans that feel that way. And I do think it's a little weird at this point now, because LeBron's relationship with the Lakers maybe doesn't seem as strong as it once did. And of course, there are always going to be rumors when that's the case about, could LeBron end his career in Cleveland? Like, that is something that, if things go sideways for the Lakers this year, like, that noise, I'm telling you right now, is going to pick up during the season, because LeBron will be a free agent last year. That Celtics game you brought up, I'm really glad you brought that one up too, because I almost look at that game, and at the time you did not want that to be the case, right? But I look at this as that was the peak of this Cavs team. And I was in Boston that night. I was at that game. That was one of I think I went to 10 road games during the regular season. That was one of them. Just like, hey, need to be at this one. Feels like this is going to be a pretty big game. And I think the Cavs were down like 25-3 or something like that, 5 or 6 minutes into the game. They looked atrocious. They looked like they didn't know what they were doing there. And someone who covers the NBA, who some Cavs fans might not like, but is certainly a friend of mine, came up to me in between the first and second quarter. He goes, "What is going on? Like, are they just the Cavs total frauds?" And you go, I didn't expect this to be the case. And then they come back, and the way they were able to come back and just shut Jason Tatum's water off really in the second half, where I think he had like 46 points in that game, but he needed 39 shots to do so. It was one of those things. It's like, that was the night where I looked at it. And at that time, the Cavs had already had a 15-game winning streak to start the season. And that was the punctuation mark, certainly, of the season and part of the 16-game winning streak that they had in the second half of the year. But that was the night where I looked at it and said, you know what? I really do think the Cavs can win the finals this year. We know it didn't go that way, but I do think that was the peak of this season. Now, as you look at the playoffs, where it obviously didn't end the way I think any of us thought it would, when you look back at that, what do you take away from it? Are you somebody, and I'm always interested to hear what this answer is from people I talk to, but are you somebody that looks at it and says injuries cannot be an excuse, they just got flat out outplayed by the Pacers? Or are you more so on the other end where it's Donovan had a bad calf again and Evan Mobley turned his ankle, DeAndre Hunter had a dislocated thumb, Darius Garland needed foot surgery? Where do you come out on all of that?
I would say I'm a bit conflicted. Like, I feel a bunch of different emotions about it. On one hand, I do think that there are very legitimate excuses for why the Cavs lost that series. I mean, the Darius Garland injury turned out to be pretty severe considering the amount of time he's going to be out after he had that surgery. Donovan was clearly playing through everything that he was going through. Losing Mobley for that one game was critical. So that was all very difficult, and I think that those are valid excuses for why the series didn't go their way. But at the same time, they let game 2 slip away. And even though they didn't have those guys, you just cannot let that happen when you are that close to winning. And yes, I know that the Pacers basically, made a living off that in this past postseason, where they would just make these unbelievable comebacks that didn't make any sense sort of at the time. But I don't know about you, but in that moment during game 2, even when they were up late, it just felt like they kept making mistakes. And even though they had a pretty sizable lead, I didn't feel very confident at all. I'm like, they're going to blow this. They're going to blow this. They're going to blow this. And then once Halliburton put up that 3 at the end, there was no doubt in my mind it was going to fall just because of the way that things were trending in that game. And then to just get absolutely embarrassed in game 4, it's just inexcusable. And it's funny, I'm looking back at the box score, and they only lost that game by 20 points. So years from now, if you look back, you might forget just how embarrassing that was. So on one hand, I feel like there's reasons to be optimistic about next season, not just because of the injuries that happened around the Cavs, but I'm also still just so frustrated that they let game 2 slip away, and then they just laid an egg in the most pivotal game of the season.
What do you make of what they did this offseason? Because I do think one of the things that I look at is the way that series went. Like, I think that shaped a lot of what they did this offseason, both in terms of letting Ty Jerome walk, in terms of trading for Lonzo Ball, letting Isaac Okoro be part of that trade. Are you more confident going into this season in the Cavs as a postseason team because of what they did this summer?
Not necessarily because of what they did this summer, but you can't just not pretend like the injuries to Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton aren't insanely beneficial for the Cavs. Like, if they were to make a move where you're thinking everything would be predicated on this move is going to help them achieve more success in the postseason. Well, they didn't have to make the move because those 2 injuries should, in theory, allow them to make a deep run in the Eastern Conference, potentially win the conference, and then face, maybe the Thunder in the NBA Finals. So it is a weird way to look at it because they're basically the beneficiary of some just awful things that happened to 2 other franchises. But considering that happened the way it did, I think it was smart for the Cavs to stand pat. With Ty Jerome, like, he got a bag, he deserved it, and after the way that the Pacers just picked on him over and over and over in that series, I think the Cavs are like, look, the regular season was a lot of fun. That game against the Heat was incredible, but we clearly got to change some things, and paying you isn't really going to help bridge that gap between them and the teams that made it very far in the postseason. So standing pat ended up working out because of all the other stuff that happened around them.
More of my conversation with Tyler Wojciak coming up in a second, but first, today's show brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe right now is game day in Cleveland. It's not. Team is on the road, but you suddenly want to realize that you want to be in the stands, and you can do this the very next time our local 9 is back at home. And that's exactly where Game Time comes in, because they're the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all of the stress. With the money that you save on the tickets, too, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or maybe even invite a bigger group to come along with you and enjoy cheering for the local 9. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple, which is a very important thing. I don't want my ticket buying process to be a complicated thing. Fast, simple, and the best possible price. That's what Game Time can provide, and that is exactly what you should be looking for. Right now, prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. Plus, they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, which another very important thing to me in my ticket buying process, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Yeah, and I do think that part of it was that they wanted to become a team that was more geared to play on both ends of the floor. And when you look at Ty, he was, a traffic cone defensively for as good as he was offensively during the season. Like, he just could not defend anybody, certainly in the postseason. You saw the Pacers relentlessly pick on him in the playoffs. And I don't even want to necessarily bring up Miami, because it's like, is that really a playoff team? Like, are we going to count that just because that Heat team was so outclassed? And with Okoro, no one was going to guard him. So I just look at that and say, yeah, I think that they got more of a two-way team. But you're right. What's going on with Halliburton, the fact that he's not going to play next year, Jason Tatum probably not going to play next year. Even if he does, the rest of that Celtics team, who they traded away old friend George Niang earlier today to the Utah Jazz, like that Celtics team, I just think is going to take a step back no matter what next year. So I do think that the Cavs are in a position where it is, if they don't win the East this year, and I know that the Knicks are going to be good again, and Orlando's on the up, and I think you can say the same about the Atlanta Hawks to an extent too, but like, if the Cavs don't win the East this year, I just don't know that it's going to happen for them. It does kind of feel like a now or never season, even though they relatively are still a young team with Evan Mobley, with Darius Garland, those guys probably not having reached their prime yet. So I do think that is an interesting way to sort of look at it. As we continue with what I'm going to now term this, I guess the Cavs fan quiz that I'm really giving you. I'm curious from your perspective, which team in the East right now do you, one, hate the most, and two, view as the biggest threat to the Cavs?
I mean, I wasn't a fan of the Pacers after that. And I mean, on one hand, it's kind of goes against everything that I kind of stand for, because like, respect to the small market team that isn't going to be able to sign big time free agents. They play team basketball. They have a coach who I respect, but the way that they just embarrass the Cavaliers, and the fact that, yeah, I mean, Halliburton likes to talk a lot of trash. Really, their whole team does. I could not like get over what they did. And yeah, that's petty, and that's just me being, a fan who is a little bit butthurt about the whole situation. So I really did not like them. I was not feeling very sorry when Miles Turner got traded. I was like, wow, that little run there ended quickly. But in terms of who I'm most concerned about, I mean, Knicks is probably the safe answer. They're probably going to be picked by a lot of people to win the Eastern Conference, but I don't know. Like, I know that they beat the Cavs pretty easily a couple years ago in the playoffs, but they just don't really scare me. I think they're very flawed as well. The Bucks are interesting, assuming Giannis is still part of the team. It's not necessarily anyone that like really scares me. It's more so just the Cavs and the fact that they just kind of keep shooting themselves in the foot in these situations.
Yeah, we'll see if they can avoid that this year. But the one other thing I really wanted to do with you tonight was to have that football basketball discussion, because I think it originated with Austin Rivers a couple of years ago, talking about guys that play basketball or play in the NBA. And of course, everyone that is a professional athlete in the NBA or the NFL, or even a collegiate athlete at the Division I level, is a tremendous athlete, that they are so much more athletic than just the normal person that you're going to see on the street. So that is kind of what needs to preface this conversation. But Austin Rivers made the point, I believe it was last summer, it might have been 2 summers ago, but this is a discussion I've been wanting to have, and I cannot think of anybody better than somebody who covers college football on a daily basis to have this discussion with. But could NBA players go to the NFL, or could NFL players go to the NBA? Which of those two things, or we could even do college football players to college basketball, or college basketball players to college football, but which of those jumps do you think would be easier to make?
I don't think an NFL player could make it to the NBA. I think that there are a select few NBA players who could play in the NFL, but only if they played football throughout high school. And even that is a reach, because I think the biggest thing that was sort of being forgotten in that whole conversation is what it's like to get hit and to have to block and to be physical like that. Like, yeah, you can have all the athleticism in the world. You can go jump up and make a catch. But then what happens when you come down with the ball and you're running with it and there are 11 guys trying to take your head off? Like, it is just such a different dynamic. And if you have not felt that, like, yeah, we all know basketball is a contact sport. It can get very physical, especially in the postseason. But football is a collision sport. And those are two very different things. If you have not grown up with that, if you have not experienced that at a pretty high level, now high school football is obviously not anything close to college or the NFL in terms of physicality, but at least if you played high school football, you understand what it feels like to get hit, and you probably at some point or another got cleaned up on the field. So if you've never experienced that before and then you get dropped into an NFL game, you will last one play, in my opinion. So there are a lot of guys in the NBA who did play football growing up. I mean, LeBron James was one of the best high school football players in Ohio before he had that wrist injury and then ultimately stopped playing for St. Vincent St. Mary. But those are the only players who could do it. I don't think that you could just take any NBA player and just drop them into the NFL. It's a select few, but on the other side of that, there's just the skill level in the NBA is so different. Even if you are a great player in the high school level and you're now in the NFL, you're just not going to make that transition. It's just not happening.
Well, and I think the size matters too. That is, I think, one of the things that gets really lost here in terms of guys from the NFL potentially thinking they could play in the NBA. There are two things that I think get lost. One, the shot making, the level of shot making in the NBA is absolutely ridiculous. It's the thing that drives me nuts is when people think, oh, there's no defense in the NBA. That could not be further from the truth. The reality is the guys in the NBA right now are so good at scoring the basketball that sometimes it just does not matter how good or not good the defense is. Like, they're going to find ways to score because they're better at that than you could possibly be defensively. So that is thing number one. I just don't think that you're the best athletes in the NFL necessarily just going to come equipped with a professional level jumper. Because I think if they had that, they might actually be in the NBA instead. And then the size is the other thing that I look at too. Because when we're watching these games, both NFL games, college football games, college basketball games, NBA games on TV, because they're on TV, the most athletic guys kind of look like they're similar sized, right? Like, there's not necessarily this big discrepancy when you're watching a game on TV as far as how big, say, Donovan Mitchell is compared to how big somebody like Myles Garrett is. Like, Myles Garrett on the Browns looks like an absolute giant of a man. Now, he is like 35 pounds heavier than this guy, but Myles Garrett and Isaac Okoro are roughly the same size. Like, Myles is bigger and more bulked up, but they are basically the same height. And Isaac Okoro, of course, no longer on the Cavs, but he was thought of as somebody that's a little bit undersized, and he's actually a little bit taller and might have longer arms than Myles Garrett. So that's the other thing too that I do think gets lost here.
Yeah, this actually happened to me in high school because we had a player on the basketball team who was a terrific basketball player, ended up playing at the University of Louisville, and had a cup of coffee in the NBA. I think he lasted around 1 or 2 seasons. Not going to reveal his name on the show, but he was a stud athlete for our high school, but he played best. It was not Donovan Mitchell. And there was always this talk, like, he's going to play football. He's going to come in and play wide receiver. The coach is going to go talk to him. He came out. He did one practice. Mind you, this is the best athlete in the school. He was so bad. So if you just take someone who's never played football and you just drop him into it, it looks like it's like watching like a baby deer running around. They have no idea what's going on. That's basically what it looked like. So ever since then, that has just been ingrained in my memory as we've had this conversation. But you're right. The point about the size and just the fact that Myles Garrett is the same height as Isaac Okoro is throwing me off right now, but it's just a reminder of like how big and tall and athletic all of those guys are. So it was a very funny discussion. I did think it was hilarious that Austin Rivers was the one kind of leading that charge. Didn't really expect that at all. But another thing that I've noticed, and playing football when I was growing up is that every football player thinks that they can be a great basketball player. And it just reminds me of that video of Mitchell Robinson when he's playing a pickup game and he literally looks like Michael Jordan and could shoot like Steph Curry. And he cannot and should not ever shoot the ball in an NBA game. Like, that should show you the difference in talent it takes to actually succeed on an NBA basketball court.
Going to dive into the NFL versus NBA player debate next with Tyler. But first, today's show brought to you by OpenPhone. And if you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider, or if the first person you called didn't answer, what'd you do? Wait around? Wait for them to call you back? Or did you find somebody else because you had a need that needed to be taken care of? You probably didn't wait. You probably did move on. And that is exactly why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or your computer. OpenPhone will let you manage business calls and texts from a single app. Plus, the shared inbox feature is a game changer where your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. Plus, their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so that you never miss a customer. Right now, OpenPhone offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That is OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA, LOCKEDONNBA. And if you have existing phone numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Right. So I played Division II college football at a school called Lake Erie College on Cleveland's east side. And if you listen to the show every day, you probably know that. If you don't, well, there's your news. And our coach banned the team from playing basketball because everybody on the team thought they could hoop. And he's like, no, one, you guys are going to get hurt. And two, you guys all suck. Like, there are on any team, there are a few guys that like played basketball in high school and were pretty good in high school, but we're just a little bit better at football. So that's why they're playing football, at least at that level. Like, when you're talking Power 5 school level, certainly a different conversation. But there are some guys that's like, I could hoop a little bit. And like, those guys are not bad, but then they'll go to, an open gym and face off against guys that are actually on the team. It's like, no, you guys are actually terrible. Like, none of you guys are actually college basketball material. So you're not allowed to play basketball anymore, because the only thing that can come of this is you're going to get hurt. There is no positive that can come out of it. You're not getting in better shape. That's what conditioning and lifting is for. You're only going to get hurt. So that was banned. And I think that football players certainly think that they could play basketball more than basketball players think that they could play football. Now, if you had to pick guys from the Cavs that you think would, I'm not even going to say could do it, but like, if in a different world they concentrated on football, would be in the NFL as opposed to the NBA, who do you think it could be?
He's not on the Cavs, but it's Isaac Okoro. I think he's got the perfect frame and the physicality and just the mindset that you need in order to succeed in football. Donovan Mitchell's obviously an easy pick, just given the fact that he's a freak athlete. He also has pretty good size to make it on a football field. But I think you and I are in agreement on this one. If anyone was going to do it, it would be Isaac Okoro, at least of a current or former Cavalier. He's the first person that came to mind. But if we're thinking broader NBA, a player that some people might not know this, Jaylen Suggs was actually a top quarterback recruit coming out of high school. At one point, he officially visited Notre Dame. They were seriously offering him a scholarship to come and play football for the university, and he decided to play basketball. I would say it's worked out for him. But there are some guys in the NBA like Suggs who I think that, if they had made a different choice earlier on in their lives, they might actually be in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's so I was actually living in Minneapolis when Jaylen Suggs was in high school. And it's funny because he was there. Chet Holmgren, of course, of Oklahoma City, was there, not a football player. Paige Beckers was also there, who has ascended to WNBA stardom. And I remember the conversation about Jaylen being like, well, he could actually go play football instead of going to Gonzaga and play basketball, because he is this 4-star recruit. Like, he was a dual threat quarterback. He was somebody that a lot of people thought could be a really good football player. I don't know that he could have necessarily I don't know that he would have been an NFL quarterback. I think that he is certainly an NFL caliber athlete. Like, I don't think that there's any pushing back on that. I agree with you on Okoro. Like, I think that he would, if he tried and he could put 30 pounds on, he'd be an excellent edge rusher, or he could try and cut weight. And I think he'd be a fantastic receiver because he's a great athlete. Donovan Mitchell absolutely has the body for it. I don't know that he has the mindset for it. And I've had this conversation with him before in the locker room. Like, when this popped up, I went over to him. I said, do you think you could play in the NFL? He's like, absolutely not. I am not built for that type of contact. So I do think a lot of those guys recognize it, but I look at the explosiveness that he has and that he can showcase on the basketball floor, and his size being 6'2", 6'3", like, he would be somebody that would be looked at as a relatively big, strong receiver that could do some really good things. And then I've got one other name on the Cavs I want to throw out there at you. And you might laugh at first, but I want you to think about it. I think Sam Merrill could be a really strong slot receiver, like a bigger slot receiver, a Jaden Greathouse type slot, because he is 6'2", 6'3". He's a better athlete than anyone gives him credit for. He's got great footwork. I think that he could be a pretty good red zone target if he would have concentrated on football as a kid.
I could see that. He does have perfect size for a wide receiver. And considering how many players in the NBA come down the court and they look at him and they think, okay, I'm going to be able to get this by this dude. They clearly haven't looked at the scouting report because he is a good defender. Like, maybe you could put that in this context where we doubt his football ability, but then he ends up going out there on the football field and ends up being a really talented player. But I want to throw another name at you, not necessarily a Cleveland Cavalier, but there are some connections. I think that if you could go back in time and say, hey, you should pick this sport from a very young age instead of basketball, they could be a really good football player. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I think, Anthony, are there Cleveland connections to this, or are there not?
There is a Cleveland connection to it.
Is it CJ McCollum?
It's Bronnie James.
Oh, Bronnie James makes sense. Yeah, especially at his size where he's only 6'2", 6'3". That makes sense because he is a good athlete. And I watched him when he was playing in the G League last year and the South Bay Lakers came to Cleveland and took on the charge. And I went to that game and I wanted to watch him. And like, he's got all of the tools that you want, like the athleticism. He's a very good athlete. He's a really smart kid. He's got a really high IQ. He's just, by NBA standards, small. But you know what small by NBA standards is in the NFL? Pretty average size for a receiver type.
Exactly. And I think that if LeBron had let him play football from a young age, I just have this feeling that actually would have been his sport. And, credit to Bronny for what he's been able to do. I mean, he looked pretty good in the G League this year, but LeBron famously did not allow Bronny to play football growing up. He said that when it came time to go to high school, then he could if he wanted to make that decision to play football, he could do it. But that's pretty hard to do, to just jump into football. People have done it when they're 14 years old. But I think that if Bronny started playing from a very, very young age, I think he could have been an awesome football player. Part of that is knowing what his dad was able to do on the football field. But you're right, he has the perfect size. He's a great athlete. He's scrappy. He just doesn't have the years and the time spent on the football field that could have gotten him into college, maybe even the NFL.
I think that's a really good pool. And then the last one I want to ask you about this. Who would be on the Cavs right now? Who would be the worst football player? The worst football player on the Cavs roster?
Wow. Jared Allen, probably.
See, I don't know.
I think he would just be averse to it, yeah.
I think Jarrett could potentially be, because I don't know that he's quite 7 feet tall. Like, I think he's closer to 6'9", 6'10". I think he could actually be an okay left tackle. Like, he'd be a little bit big, but I think that he could put on enough weight to where he might be an okay left tackle.
It's not just the size. It has this the mindset. It just doesn't seem like that would be his thing. But if he were to apply himself and fill out a little bit, I don't think he has like wide enough shoulders to put on that kind of weight. If we're talking other players who I think just kind of had that look of a football player, I mean, Jay Crowder, he had really broad shoulders, really muscular dude. Like, he looked like he could play defensive end in the NFL if he ever wanted to. But I was not expecting you to side with Jared Allen, but it's possible. Who else? Now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, Darius Garland is small, but hey, there's all kinds of undersized football players. I just don't think Darius Garland has put in the time. But, maybe if he really applied himself, it could work out.
See, I think Evan Mobley would be a terrible football player. I do. I think that he's the one guy that I look at and say, you know what? He's too tall. He's not somebody like, I think he has the frame to where he can put on some weight. And I think that he does need to put on some weight in order to reach his basketball ceiling. But at his height, I don't think that he'd be able to put on nearly enough weight. Although, I mean, if we do want to talk about guys that are a little bit oversized, Florida did trot out that 7'9" kid to football practice to see if he could block field goals. I think they tried to do, which is just absolutely outrageous.
Hey, I mean, sometimes you got to find the edge where you can find it. Would Larry Nance Jr. be good?
I think not now, maybe in his athletic prime, because I don't think that he's quite the athlete that he was. And, he's in his 30s now, but like when he was first traded to the Cavs back in 2018, where he was this crazy athlete and he's 6'8", I think that maybe if he put on some weight, he could have been an edge rusher or maybe a tackle. But I also look at it and say, these guys are so athletic, and edge rushers are crazy athletes too. And tackles are the most underrated athletes on the field anytime during a football game. But I look at it and just think, I don't know that would be the best use of the bounciness and the athleticism that he had back then. Now, I don't think he's quite the same athlete that he once was. And I think that he made the right choice with basketball.
This is sort of off topic, but it is relevant probably for all the viewers and listeners of this show. One time, me and my friends got in the dumbest debate of all time. And it was really just 1-on-5, I think, in the moment. But I had one friend who was convinced that if Zion Williamson were to apply himself to football for like 2 full years, that he would be as good as Myles Garrett. And we almost had to remove him from the group chat. It got that hostile. And I think he eventually realized how bad of a take that was. But this conversation just reminded me about that. And also, it's funny knowing a little bit more about Zion now and just his questions, to say the least, about his work ethic. Like, it would just never happen. Myles Garrett is already one of the best edge rushers of all time. So to say that Zion could just figure that out in a couple of years, yeah, he's a great athlete, but Myles Garrett is not from this earth. So anyway, it reminded me of that. I'm sure that a lot of the people who are watching and listening who are Browns fans can sort of scoff at that notion as well.
The one thing I'll say about Zion, I don't think he would have trouble putting the weight on. I think he'd be able to do that. I think he could handle that part of having to get ready for football.
True. Maybe he'd be better as like a guard, where he could just be stout and pull.
The next Quentin Nelson. He would just absolutely wreck dudes in the hole as a pulling guard. But Tyler, thank you so much for doing this, man. Very much appreciate it. Where can everyone find what you're doing?
Well, if you're into Notre Dame football, I'm doing daily shows every morning, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Or if you're an Ohio State fan, I have had a lot of them in my comments. Not so much lately, but certainly during the playoff run. So if you're an Ohio State fan and you want to give a Notre Dame fan a hard time, give me a watch, give me a listen, put something in the comments, because guess what? All engagement is good engagement.
Well, thanks to Tyler for doing this, and thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure to drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about the show. And if you're watching on YouTube as we get out of here, do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for us. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I'll be back again tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.